I also know I'm like behind this thing. I'm not just a floating head. I'm actually like a real person. I'm not gonna be up here for too long. I'm gonna get out of the way so we can hear from our amazing panel. Just wanted to start us off with a little bit of an introduction to the coalition and thank everybody for coming in this morning. It means a lot. We've been working really hard for a long time.
Yeah.
So we're here.
Yeah. That's right.
My name's Kamal Butcher. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work as Director for People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom, aka PCSF. I want to welcome everybody who has joined us in person and those that are joining as well on streaming on Instagram Live. PCSF is an organization that is democratizing the legislative process by working with those directly impacted by policing and incarceration to collectively draft a people's bill to replace the 1994 crime bill, which you'll learn more about today. I want to thank each and every one of you for attending today's panel, The People's Process, centering directly impacted voices in policy conversations on repealing and replacing the 94 crime bill. We have a distinguished panel of guests today. As you can see, you learn more about what their work and what they're up to, including my fellow Trojan, Congresswoman Sydney Kamala-Dove, and Kendrick Sampson. Before I turn it over to the panel, I want to remind everyone in the audience of an important date that recently passed. Wednesday, September 13th, marked the 29th anniversary of the 1994 crime bill, which ushered in an era of mass incarceration and the separation of families and communities. Next year will mark the 30th anniversary. 30 years of devastating harm to Black and brown communities that have largely gone unaddressed. Over the past 4 years, PCSF has been dedicated to transforming our country's culture of surveillance, policing, and injustices embedded in our legal system. The cornerstone of our coalition's campaign is the implementation of what we call the People's Process. Those of us that are in the room, in your handouts, the dark blue handout has like a breakdown of what I'm about to explain so you can follow along. So the People's Process is a broad and sweeping civic engagement strategy that has engaged diverse communities in 5 states across the country: California, Illinois, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. Specifically those most directly impacted by mass criminalization and incarceration. Over the past 3 years, the People's Process has used focus groups, digital outreach, surveys, town halls, and people's movement assemblies to determine the priorities, budgets, and policies that will replace the 1994 crime bill, addressing the crisis of criminalization and providing the resources demanded by the communities most harmed by this devastating law. I'm going to take a second just to break down the PMAs a little bit more. Our PMAs were led by community-based organizations that deeply engage and build connections to directly impacted folks in order for them to share their experiences in the carceral system, to explore their needs, desires, and dreams, identify opportunities and solutions that focus on safety and freedom, not cops and cages, and build consensus on policy priorities that will inform what we call the People's Bill. Said differently, the PMA is a unique movement building tool that we use to democratize decision making as we advocate for and enact policies and policy solutions that are centered in safety and freedom and practice self-governance in a way that is scalable and repeatable across the country. The PMAs also help us ensure that as the coalition addresses the devastating harms of families and communities across the country, we're not gatekeeping. We're not cutting out directly impacted voices and expertise, folks' expertise through their lived experiences in any policy conversations that we're having. Before I end and get to the panel, I want to thank my colleague and friend, Cameron Bell. She's the architect of this. We owe her a great deal. She's the director of organizing for the coalition. She's a leader, and it just so happens that she's today's moderator.
All right.
So with that, I'll hand it over to Cameron.
Thank you. I'm gonna make sure y'all can hear. Oh, I can hear me, so I know y'all can hear me. Okay, great. First, let's give it up for my colleague and friend Kamalu, our director of the coalition. He is the backbone of our coalition. I am super excited to be here. Just want to thank y'all again for joining us. Y'all could be a lot of places, but you're here with us in person and online, so thank you and good morning. We're gonna jump into it, right? The name of our panel is The People's Process, Centering Directly Impacted Voices in Policy Conversations on Repealing and Replacing the '94 Crime Bill. So again, my name is Cameron Bell. I use she, her pronouns, and I am excited to introduce our panelists today. I'm gonna start and make sure I get everything right. So I'm gonna start with Sean LaFleur. He's an organizer with All of Us or None out of Riverside, California. And he's an advocate for those who are directly impacted by the system and has directly impacted himself. We also have Dr. Leslie Collins.
Yes, right.
She is an associate professor at Fisk University and the people's researcher. All that data y'all see on those forms, all the stuff we're gonna get into later, she helped us break that down and make it real and make it plain. So she is really the people's researcher. Now, we have Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove, a Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives who represents the 37th District in California, which covers Los Angeles County area. You know. So welcome. Thank you. And then last but certainly not least, with the shades that we love so dearly, and a true partner and friend in this work, Kendrick Sampson is an activist and founder of Build Power, a nonprofit platform building organization that raises up and educates the public on issues affecting Black and Brown communities. Kendrick is also an actor, if y'all ain't know, who's on strike, so power to the people.
That's right.
Power to the people. Who is well known for the role of Nathan Campbell on Insecure. So welcome. Thank you for being here. So we're just going to jump in, just sort of formatting note, right? As most panels, we'll start with our own questions for the panel, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So please hold your questions till the end. We'll have some time at the end. Jot them down if you need to, but we'll just jump right in. So Sean, I'm going to give you the mic first, and I'm going to ask you my questions. So you've been a delegate for the People's Process, as I introduced, meaning that you organized our surveys that we did, the PMAs that we did, or town halls. And you attended all these meetings to help build up the base and build consensus around our policy initiatives that we'll unveil early next year. You're also doing this work by being an organizer, so you out here in these streets.
In the streets.
Please, this question is two-part though.
Okay.
Please describe your experience as a delegate who engaged directly in the People's Process and what that impact has been.
2 words: multidimensional and explosive. Right? As somebody who has been incarcerated, when I say incarcerated, 11 years, and been falsely accused, you sit there and you wonder why. And when you can connect your life to a policy, it changes your brain, it changes how you think, right? That's number one. As an organizer, we learn that we cannot mobilize if people don't believe they have agency, right? And that's difficult with people who have been left behind, not because they're inept, just because they were left out, right? And then we have the People's Process, which raises all of us up, because in that process, I'll keep it short, we inform, we collaborate, and then we implement, and that changes our world. And then number 4, I don't know where Dana is at, but our Poly-Ed sessions is a deep dive into the federal process that has left me equipped, and I'll leave it as that.
Thank you. Doctor, is you next.
Okay, I don't know if I want to follow that.
I got you. It's gonna flow. I promise. So like we said, you're associate professor at Fisk. You are the people's researcher, and you helped us really solidify all this data analysis from all of these town halls from all, again, our 5 states: Tennessee, California, Illinois, North Carolina, and Texas, and a few other focus groups, right? So I want to hear you give us a couple of data points, right, from those, from the town halls, from the surveys, that kind of highlight what people were saying.
Okay, so we collected 478 surveys from people who were incarcerated and not incarcerated. Of those surveys, 82% reported not feeling safe in their community with the police, or said that the police did not keep them safe. Interestingly, this was confirmed by the qualitative data that we took from the PMA meetings and other small group and focus group meetings that we did. Without a doubt, at 100% of the meetings, someone said, or multiple people talked about instances where they, or a family member, or a neighbor, or a friend had been harassed, or detained, or arrested without reason, which leads to this collective fear, this community fear and trauma in our neighborhoods that has been going on for years. Now, it's coupled with this kind of ambivalence because we are taught to believe that the police are the people that you call when you need help, when there's a crime committed. And a lot of times, and a lot of people mention calling them when they were children if they were in instances of domestic violence. And so they would call them for assistance, but that assistance could also mean somebody going to jail, mama going to jail or daddy going to jail, which means the breakup of their families or the removal of the children from the home. And so there's this constant contradiction that ran through responses about how people felt about the police and their safety.
And so the second part of my question is, how does participatory research, right, the way that we engage this process that you conducted, differ from traditional research and how data is collected on the criminal legal system?
Okay, so participatory research is a form or a method of research where people who are stakeholders, who have been directly impacted or indirectly impacted by the criminal justice system or criminal injustice system, are required to participate in every aspect of systematic inquiry. So from how we formulate the question, the overarching research question, to the kind of data that we collect, to what questions we ask, to what is our study population and our sample, and how are we going to go about accessing them. And that's really important because, as well as the data analysis, right? And what we do with the data once we've collected it. So we privilege community, using the data for their benefit. This is important because it's been my experience that doing this kind of research changes how I understand what I am doing. It informs the actions that I do, but it also changes the narrative about who people are. So participating in this and getting involved in this has helped me to change the narrative around what it means to be, to have experience of the carceral system.
Beautiful. Thank you. Y'all see why I'm happy to be up here today? Amazing. I'm gonna give you this next. I have a lot to read for you though.
All right.
I know. We gotta let the people know what you've been working
I
on.
guess
That's the
so.
thing. So Congresswoman, we are honored. Again, you've said this 100 times. One of the reasons that we're really excited about having you here today is because of your leadership on safety and freedom, especially in the California State Legislature. During that time, you spearheaded getting the CARES Act signed into law, a law that provides trained, community-led teams to respond to 911 calls instead of police. So tying back to what Dr. Leslie just said, right? Folks are calling, and then the help that's coming is not actually helpful. It's traumatizing, right? And now, in your first term on Capitol Hill, your leadership in safety and freedom continues as you represent Los Angeles County. So we're going to get more to that later, more specifics. But to start, your question is 3 parts.
Okay.
It's a why question. We love why. We're organizers. We do a lot of why questions. Mm-hmm. So we want to know the why behind your leadership in this field on safety and freedom. What opportunities do you see to advance this work in Congress right now? And what challenges do you see in replacing and repealing the 94 crime bill?
Yeah, so the why is pretty simple for me. Part of the why is the 1994 crime bill, which became a carceral accelerant for Black people around the country. It gave judges the pass to get rid of due process when it comes to us, to use discretion in a very racist and discriminatory way, and to use the law to put us away for life. It also created the ability for the federal government to be the largest collector and repository of data on us, to really help them figure out how to monitor and incarcerate us at a faster, more effective rate. The why is because of the letters that I would get from folks who were incarcerated, sharing stories about their treatment in jail and in prison. Oftentimes sobering, disheartening, horrible, inhumane. And then hearing it on the floor, validated by white legislators who would then say that kind of treatment is okay because those folks are not of any value. And then the third why is because I have 2 black boys and a black husband, and I have had police come to our door to do quote unquote welfare checks. I have been in the car when the police have stopped us. Why? Because he's a black man in a dark car with tinted windows, and he must be up to want no good. And if it was not for his proficiency in the law and knowing his rights and mine, we'd be trying to get bail money rather than checking a popo. The challenges are, we are still in a colonial country.
That's right.
With folks who are every day trying to figure out how to erase us, how to further marginalize us, how to detain us, who are so afraid of our power, of our history, they don't know what to do. We can't have any votes today because they don't know what to do. Passing legislation if they can to get rid of our history so that we don't have it, continuing to find ways to keep us from the polls, and taking black women out of elected office because they don't like the fact that they're strong enough to say, hey, this is some bullshit. So those are the challenges that we face, and they're coming at us with more frequency and venom because they are afraid.
That's a word. Thank you for that. So, Kendrick, as everyone in this room probably knows, you're an actor. Some might not know that you also founded Build Power, an organization that shifts culture by building platforms that uplift stories of BIPOC communities and partner in that work confronting injustice for individuals to realize their liberation. Liberation, yeah. This question is 2 parts, okay? We find there's a persistent kind of narrative in the media, right? An entertainment industry that normalizes surveillance and policing culture, right? So all of the kind of threads you just touched on. For example, Law and Order, one of the most popular and longest running shows on television to this day. So we want to hear you speak to both how the media and entertainment industry, like their power in driving the narrative, right? Like what is that power? And how can these industries play a role in shifting to a culture of safety and freedom?
Yeah. Boots Riley just posted something yesterday that I thought was really good about, how the media is spinning the narrative right now, or using this same effective narrative that they've been using over and over again to stoke fear and make people think that there's like just waves of crime happening everywhere and it's spiking and we should, be afraid to step out of our front door. And the answer to that is more of the same thing that hasn't ever worked. It has only made our neighborhoods more dangerous. It's a really, that's an effective campaign. You're literally saying, hey, the answer is actually be to
Right.
give money to the people that make you
More scared.
more scared and less healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they already have way too much money and they're taking up half of your city's budget or whatever, right? Like, that's wild. And it's effective today after such an effective campaign to reverse
Yeah.
that effect, to repeal the 94 crime bill, to repeal all types of legislation and architecture, right? And monuments, and right? After such an effective uprising in 2020 and saying, you know, that we have to put an end to this. We have to put an end to this, and we have to invest the money in what we can, in what can make our communities healthier. That was so many years that they had to deconstruct, to break apart, that has informed us over and over again, because people watch Law and Order episodes and really do believe that the legal process is about 15 minutes. And and that you can, and that somebody really will advocate for you, and the system won't win. It won't win against you as long as you're a good person and you can speak really well or something, in the colonizer's language specifically. And so it's like a microwave version and like delusional at the same time, because it doesn't work like that at all.
Right.
And mostly actually is designed to keep us there, is designed to be unjust, and to target specific people, Black folks, brown folks. And even now you see the connection in Hollywood. It's like, we're striking right now. And, people think that, police unions and are unions? That's like a narrative thing. That's like, people really think that they're unions. They're not even unions. It's craziness. And they can call themselves that and be a part of AFL-CIO or, just saying, and so when you block people's money for real, you see just the other day, I think, the hotel workers are striking and the police came in from the Marriott or something and, cleared them out and took their drums and such, that's in LA, and also if we really did block the studio entrances, what would happen? Who would show up?
Police.
The police, right. Thank you, Tia. Yes, police would show up. And so, just thinking about how, Hollywood has played a role in making people so, or bringing people so far away from reality that they advocate for. I mean, even the first blockbuster was a white supremacist commercial. It was literally, Birth of the Nation. It was screened at the White House right down the street. And it caused the resurgence of the KKK. They participated in being in anti-Black narratives and pushing that legislation and pushing that fear tactic. And now it's at our doorsteps with this mix of what we should be doing, to be completely honest, in the labor movement, what we should be doing and what we should be focusing on, and making sure that we get things like the Fraternal Order of the Police out of the labor movement, and not even considered a part of the labor movement, to make sure that we understand the connection between the 94 crime bill and the dismantling of networks and coalitions of people that are trying to get us free. The connection between the 94 crime bill and the work to criminalize people and stop Cop City right now, right? And the criminalization of protesters. What was allowed to happen to me and other protesters in 2020 during the uprisings, when the LAPD abused us, kettled us in and abused us, for forever, with a distinct intention to squash rebellion, right? To squash uprising, to squash protest. So it's all connected.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that word and reminder. We spent a lot of time, right, on the harms and kind of this kind of narrative, right, that we are living in. We want to shift a little bit to some of the policies and the solutions, and to your point, like, what's the real world, right? Like, not this la la land that they tell us is what's keeping us safe, what's actually keeping us safe, and what our folks told us, right? Like, what's coming out of this process. And just as a note, so you all know where the coalition is in the work, we are currently finalizing our bill framework and our policy priorities, and so we're hoping to unveil that at the beginning of next year. And like we said, it's been participatory this whole time, so our folks have had a chance to look back at the framework and say, okay, this still resonates from what we said during our PMAs and during our town halls and in our surveys, to have another look. So we didn't just take it and run with it, right? We made sure folks had input every step of the way. So we're finalizing that now, hoping to wrap it up by the end of this year and be ready to unveil next year. Which, again, next year will be the 30th anniversary of the crime bill, right? 30 years of terrible policies, failed policies, and it's time for change, right?
Yes.
So,
September 13th was not just the anniversary, but it was also the 27th anniversary of the passing of Tupac Shakur.
oh wow.
We are celebrating 50th anniversary hip hop. Thought I'd just share that.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're right. Cause time isn't real for me sometimes. I'm
Yeah.
forgetting all my dates, so you're right.
No.
Yeah. So before I launch into this next question, I just want to highlight the 5 key areas in our bill framework: investing in communities, addressing the school to prison pipeline, reimagining safety, which addresses the policing system, reforming our criminal legal system, and transforming reentry, right? So how do we help our folks who are coming home, making sure that they're getting back and doing well. So my lovely panelists, we'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these solutions. So we're gonna start with the Congresswoman. We're gonna highlight some of your past legislation. So you've been in Congress for less than a year. You already introduced bills on safety and freedom, including the Second Chance Act for Justice package of bills, the Women in Criminal Justice Reform Act, a bill to address juvenile justice system, and the Pregnant Women in Custody Act. So that's already amazing. Can you talk about why you introduced these pieces of legislation and what other policy priorities you want to pursue?
The why again. Yes, why is because it's the right thing to do. That's super simple, right? And you look at even the folks in Congress and at the state that I didn't agree with, if you spend a little time talking about them or doing some research, everyone, white, black, brown, indigenous, Asian, has been touched by the criminal justice in some way. Some of those folks, just disproportionately, have been allowed to sail through the system. And for many of us, the system just hit us on the head and then locked us up. So I try to find those gaps in reality, in my reality, to say, okay, how do I lean into this gap? Because I know this person, has a nephew who got caught up in drugs, or has a sister who spent a little time in jail, and so they must be able to connect. The why is also because I chaired the Select Committee on Incarcerated Women when I was in the state legislature, and it allowed me to bring Black, white, Asian, brown, indigenous women to the forefront to share their experiences. Women are still being shackled when they're pregnant and giving birth in jail. Women come into jail or prison not pregnant and then somehow miraculously become pregnant. And you don't want to talk about who was the one, but because prison rape isn't happening. Juveniles are coming in 16, 17 years old and eventually leaving, A, traumatized from sexual abuse and assault on a daily basis, and B, reading at a 2nd grade level. So then what happens when they come out? They're sort of transitioned right into high school at a 2nd grade level. We give people $200 when they leave as gate money and expect them to then not have any problems with reentry. They're finding a house, getting a car, saying hello to their boo and taking them out, for dinner, to celebrate getting out, getting new clothes on $200. So that's the why, because none of that makes any sense. And so it was important to address those things, and I tried to do that in all of the pieces of legislation that I've authored. Some of those are at the state level. Many of them, it's so important that you have a national framework. Oftentimes, and I have no illusion that this Congress is crazy. Although, interestingly enough, some of the craziest people in this Congress are very interested in some fashion of criminal justice reform because they're interested in having a criminal become president again. So we're going to use this window of time to figure out how to take advantage of that insanity. But ultimately the why is to provide a federal framework to begin to have a push and pull relationships with states across this country to mimic federal legislation. And oftentimes state legislatures need a sign from the federal government to allow them to go into their states and try to create change. And sometimes you see change at the state level, and then that gives federal legislators the opportunity to do the same. It is always going to be a dance. But at the end of the day, the why is women are incarcerated. They're going into prison and jail 5 times the rate as men. They're staying there longer. They're getting out with less access to resources. Oftentimes they're single parents. They're not getting any support when they're in prison. They don't get any support when they're out of prison. Juveniles, our people are being put in at a faster rate and also having to deal with the same kinds of challenges. And so if we are trying to have a restorative justice system and a transformative space when folks come out, you have to address those whys.
Right, thank you. You're next. So keeping on some of the policies, right? Dr. Collins, what did we learn from the People's Process about when policy solutions should focus on investment versus divestment?
Well, I think some of the most poignant things that we learned are that the people who participated in this study with us are very clear that they believe that the overinvestment of the criminal justice system and the divestment of community support systems are inextricably linked. And so we need to develop policies that at the very least, and I've said this to Cameron a couple of times, at the very least, if we're not going to cut funding for law enforcement and those things, can we just stop giving them more?
Come on.
Can we just freeze the giving them more money?
Right.
And reinvest that money? According to the data, 70% and over half believe that we need to be funding and advocating for things like education and changing the education department and how we educate our children, especially when it comes to having law enforcement in the schools, housing and offering affordable housing, offering jobs that have livable and thrivable wages. Healthcare, including mental health care as well as physical health care. But the more poignant thing that came out of the research, the more poignant results that came out of the data are how they believe we needed to advocate for these things. And so one of the things that was said in a meeting by a colleague of mine, by a colleague and co-researcher, is that we need to advocate for our community as a whole, no matter where you lay your head. And so if you are in prison, maybe having a livable wage so that you can take care of your families while they are living with you through that process, as well as advocating for a livable wage for those who are not incarcerated, for decent housing, for decent health care, and those kinds of things. Did I?
You did. Thank you. So, as y'all might hear us say multiple times throughout the day, right? The coalition and folks in this movement space, we believe that those closest to the problem need to be closer to the solutions. Those solutions actually be viable, right? We're not just going to reinvent the wheel. We're not going to listen to quote unquote experts or whatever. We're the experts, right? Like the folks who've been engaged and been involved. And so, Kendra, we want to ask you, right? Why have you and Build Power partnered with the coalition in this work?
It's kind of easy. Yeah, doing the work. I mean, right now, that is the end of the answer. Y'all are doing the work, period. And then, right now, there is a resurgence of this like super predator 2.0 kind of campaign. And, I think LA just raised their budget for police by $1 billion over the next 4 years. And, Karen Bass is there, and we love her. And she just approved, you know what I'm saying? If y'all remember the mayor of New York at the time of the 94 crime bill, there was a lot of NAACP and a whole bunch of support of, from black leaders back then. And now, you've got another progressive, you got Gavin Newsom just gave $270 million, something like that, approved for this narrative that came through of people breaking into these corporate stores because we really care about that. And I'm like, how is it so easy to get money for an inflated budget for something that's not going to help, and so hard to get more money for the things that we actually think are the first priority? Like the first priority, people would say, you know what, I really do think that you should invest more in education and making sure that our children are good. I really do think that you should, invest in housing. I think there should be a permanent solution for, people being unhoused, jobless, whatever it is, right? They would say absolutely, more training programs, for the community, more community investment, more mental health care. There's so many priorities that would come before, hey, give the people with guns that have been terrorizing us more money. And yet, that bill usually passes faster than anybody else's. And those budgets be like, all right, let's go and just go through military budgets at the federal level. It shouldn't be that hard. And obviously, Hollywood has a important role to play in that. And giving all these heroic, military movies and cop movies and people jumping on cars with our favorite faces, being like, hey, I'm gonna smash you and ignore your rights, but I'm gonna look cool while doing it and take off my sunglasses. And maybe you will advocate for more money in the police budget that doesn't need any more inflation. So we have a duty to really tell the reality of what's happening and be a beacon to the rest of the world, and we've been doing the opposite. And so we have to partner with people like y'all who are doing the real work in the communities of saying, hey, come participate in this process that actually talks about what we really need and put that into envisioning, right? I just saw the Afrofuturism exhibit at the Smithsonian yesterday, and that shit was dope. It was Octavia Butler and all that stuff. And it reminded me, Erica Alexander the other day was like, she had such a hard time selling projects about us in the future because, studios would say that black people don't see ourselves in the future or whatever. And she said, we're natural futurists. Yeah. We are natural futurists because y'all stole our past from us. We ain't had no other choice to be like, hey, what's that way? And we've had to construct what you call culture today. There ain't no white culture, you know what I'm saying? It's American culture is created by black folks. There is no, American is colonization and it gets confusing, but you know what I'm saying? Black people are the reason that this exists. And we have to think about the future. We have to imagine that. And y'all are creating a process to reimagine a policy, to reimagine how the system works, to reimagine legality and all that bullshit that has actually imprisoned us, to be actually more community-centered. That can be liberating.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can I just quickly counter what Kendrick said about the state giving out $270 million to deal with retail theft, and the doc talking about livable dignity while you're incarcerated, and even if you're not, with the fact that California last year killed a bill to take slavery and involuntary servitude out of its constitution because they thought it would create an economic catastrophe for the state. So that's our reality in 2022-23.
That's sobering. That's Sister Sean. Thank you. Yeah.
Who the challenges? There are many.
It's okay. It's okay. That's why we in this fight.
You feel how everybody was like slavery?
California, right? Bless us. Sean, I want you to close this out and talk about what it means, right? How policy may be different when legislators view directly impacted folks, right? Whatever that means across the spectrum, whether they've been incarcerated, have loved ones inside, or impacted. When legislators view directly impacted folks as policy advisors throughout the entire policymaking process, how is that different?
I'm gonna keep this short. I know I got to. I love this question, right? And I can answer it because what she's talking about, Congresswoman, is ACA 3, and we all worked on it, right? And we worked on it together, and that's why it was an equitable and just solution to our economic disempowerment, right? I know exactly what she's talking about, and that's why it's important that we have a voice. And that's just impromptu. Like, I didn't know she was going to say that, and they got me fired up, and hopefully get it passed this year as ACA 8. But it's also important, right? Because that process, it humanizes us, right? And it's easy for them to throw a number at us. My prison number is AD 4290, right? And I'm always in rooms with PhDs, and they're always talking about the numbers. But guess what? Congresswoman just said it. They use the numbers to manipulate us, right? But they cannot manipulate my story, right? They can sensationalize my incarceration, right? But what if I said, well, last year I developed a team and we gave out over $1 million in funding to people, right? But then I said, you know what? I can do more, so I quit that job so I could be a full-time organizer and create my own thing. Right? But they're not going to tell that story. Right. So it's important that we tell that story because there are 2.3 million of me, maybe more, right? And if we don't tell that story, then we're going to continuously be a number. One last thing, right? Because real leadership, we do look at the numbers, but we look at the numbers to either recreate the results or reject the results. But once we look at the numbers, we ask, why?
Right.
That's what we ask. But they're taking away our why by wanting to quantify us without no qualitative data. Right? We have to tell our stories, and we have to understand how important the qualitative data is, and that's why it's important that I'm in a room and we're all in a room. Thank you.
One more time for this panel, y'all. I'm sorry.
Hi everyone. My name is Ziora. I'm a senior sociology and political science student at North Carolina A&T, and I'm also an organizer with the Centers, an anti-imperialist, anti-police organization based out of Chicago. My question is open to anybody that wants to take it. All of you have spoken to varying degrees about how we need to reorient how we view the police, how we view crime, and who we view as criminals and why. My question is, how can we as organizers, educators, congresspeople, social justice researchers, people with influence, make sure this cultural reorientation isn't co-opted by people with power and capital that use radical language while actively working to dissolve Black radical politics.
Okay. Yes.
Question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
You start.
Well, I would say that you answered the question in your question. Is we know the language. Stop letting them take away our radicalism. Stay radical. Stop using their process. Create our own process. Let's stay with the people's process. That's it. It's that easy. So stay Black.
So, okay, well, that is a very good question. I think the way that is just to keep going, right? To keep putting out from a researcher perspective, and the reason that I became a researcher, the kind of researcher that I became, and Cameron asked me the difference between traditional research and participatory research. I don't know, because I've never done traditional research. This is just what I've been doing, so that we can create our own data. As Sean said, numbers rule everything, right? They use numbers for everything, to oppress, to enrich, all of those kinds of things. And so we need to have our own numbers. And we need to speak their language. We need to start co-opting the language of research, which is my goal ultimately, to teach everybody this language, so that when we get in those rooms and we have to start to contradict, we can contradict them in their language, in a language that they can't dismiss and can't just say, oh, well, that's just them being, liberal or whatever word they choose to use, right? And so I think that's one way, is for young people like you and myself who are a part of the academy to be out in the community demystifying what it means to do research and to collect those data.
I would just say my job as a legislator is to listen to my constituents, to stay Black. It's okay to be afraid. You still have to be unapologetic in your path for fighting for justice. Call people out. Don't be afraid of losing fans or followers or friends, and have a North Star. And find the North Star that continues to center you in the work that you're supposed to do. If your work is about trying to be a celebrity, that's one thing. But if your work is about fighting for justice and freeing your people, then you probably won't have as many friends as you want, because that work is really hard.
Yeah, I think understanding what Black radical values are is the first step, and then building community around those values specifically holds you accountable, because being radical is exhausting, especially when you know what you're asking for, what you're demanding is not really radical.
Right.
You're just radical in their eyes.
Come on.
The people that don't want you to be free.
Come on.
And so it gets very Twilight Zone-y and confusing and exhausting to sort through that confusion. And sometimes you do just want to be chill for a little bit. And unfortunately, we get duped into thinking chill is using their language and forgetting our own values in that, and forgetting the purpose, and then being like, all y'all exhausted and I just need a break from y'all. But a break from y'all means a break from the values. and the accountability. And we just exist in white spaces sometimes, thinking that finally we got resources, because the only people that got resources are the people that are attacking and constantly working against our freedom and those values. And so the answer is really building community based on those values and expanding that community and constantly grounding that community and supporting that community, because the only way to dismantle it is to grow that process so that we're not all exhausted, and that we can check ourselves and be like, we're not delusional, and that we can stay radical and be proud of that and be cool and be energized by that and keep each other healthy, because that's the healthiest place to be. And that's the only way to freedom.
You know, I'm mad we gotta stop. We gotta wrap this up. You know, they done gave me the wrap up sign about 5 times. But thank y'all so much just for sharing your insight, your wisdom, your time, your energy. I'm gonna invite Kamala back up to give us our closing remarks, and then, you know, we'll get y'all up out of here.
I'll be quick. That filled me up just now. Thank you all for that. I'm thinking of the quote from June Jordan: "We are not gods, but we are many." The challenges are many. You said that earlier, Cameron, but so are we. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We really appreciate y'all, especially the Congresswoman. We know your schedule is jam-packed because of CDC and all this stuff that's going on, and also your work representing your folks. We really appreciate you, Kendrick, as well, always showing up, always. We're organizers, so we can't leave without asks and next steps.
Always.
So I have 3 for y'all. The first, if you're interested in learning more about the coalition's work, or if you think there's a congressional office that we need to be in communication and collaboration with, please let us know. We're going to stick behind today to make sure we're building with y'all for the future. Secondly, if you know an organization that's interested in being a member of our coalition, same ask, stay after, let's talk about it. And lastly, please follow us on social media. Everybody that signed up today is going to get a package with all the materials, including all of our social media handles and everything like that. On Instagram and Twitter, we are at PPLS_coalition. We'll make sure everybody gets access to that. Thank you to everybody that joined us on Instagram Live. Stay tuned for more coming up soon. And thank you, everyone, for coming today, spending your time with us. Let's give one more round to our panelists.